All right. My name is James Barclay. I'm a tools engineer at Pinterest. Today I'm going to talk about working with system frameworks in Python and Objective-C. And first of all, I'm getting over a cold right now, so if my voice cracks, or if I drink a lot of water, I apologize. Before we get started, just wanted to put the feedback link in here. All I ask is that you remember my smiley face before you fill anything out. All right. So there will be code demonstrated in Python and Objective-C during this session. If you're so inclined to try to follow along, or at least look at the code on your machine while I'm talking about it, you can download that from GitHub. So for those of you in the back, if you can't read it, it's just github.com/futureimperfect, and then psu-pyobc-demo, and then the same thing with PSU demo for the Objective-C one. And additionally, I'll put the slides up after this talk. And I had to put at least one transition in here, so one animation. So it's for you. All right, so we'll get down to the agenda. The first thing we'll talk about is what exactly a system framework is and why you should care as a sysadmin. Then we'll give a brief overview of the frameworks, the classes, and APIs that will be demonstrated in this talk. We'll do a quick demo in PyObc, and then a lengthier demo in Objective-C, Coco. And then we'll have wrap up, and you can ask questions. There's a lot to cover here, but hopefully we'll have time afterwards, and feel free to catch me in the hall later. So what is a system framework? According to Apple, these are the interfaces that you need to write software for the Mac. If you were to look in your system library frameworks folder on your Mac now, you'd see plenty of them there. You as a system administrator might care about this. Maybe you want to write a GUI app or just a script that takes advantage of these frameworks, or a more sophisticated command line tool. And I think most importantly, learning more about this stuff will just teach you more about the system that you're supporting, and probably make you better at your job. So it's worthwhile. So here's the obligatory slide showing kind of all of the classes that we'll be touching on, whether in Python or Objective-C. If you looked at the session description, this is basically the same thing. I have core graphics up there. We're not really going to be getting too deep into that. I just we'll look at how to get the current session dictionary from Quartz in Python to determine if the screen is locked, which might be useful for you if you, say, want a script to run only if the machine is actually being used, or the other way around. So CoreFoundation is the first one we'll talk about. This is a C framework that knows about Objective-C objects, which is a little odd, but it actually ends up working out quite nicely. Some of the CoreFoundation framework is actually written in Objective-C, which is unusual for a C framework. And this, if you've looked at Objective-C code, you may have noticed the CF class prefix. This offers things like CF string, CFPreferences, and so on. And any of you that have ever heard of toll-free bridging, the way that works behind the scenes is that certain toll-free bridged objects are actually CoreFoundation objects behind the scenes. So you could easily cast an NS string as a CF string, and vice versa. There's a lot of talk about Coco. Coco is it's a wrapper or umbrella framework consisting of AppKit, Foundation, and CoreData. Foundation is basically the useful primitive object classes and utility classes, and this uses the NS class prefix, which you would see quite a bit working with Objective-C and Coco. This provides things like NS string, NS dictionary, and so on. AppKit is the UI system framework on OS X, similar to how UIKit is on iOS. It contains things like scrollers, buttons, the window Chrome, and so on. And the last piece of Coco is CoreData. It's like an object persistence framework that you work with as a developer, but it hides the underlying SQL from you. So it's a higher level API. CFPreferences, it's a thread-safe class for working with application and user preferences. It's not tool-free bridged to NSUserDefaults, which is the corresponding ObjectiveC framework. If you were to do something like want to modify preferences not owned by the current user, you would need to be executing that as the root user. And then here's just a quick demo of how you would retrieve preference value in ObjectiveC and in Python. So in this case, the fewer characters, obviously, in the Python example, less verbose. NSApplication manages the event loop. If you were to, for example, create a blank Xcode project, you would notice, if you looked at the main.m file, that it returns an instance of like the NSApplication main function, which creates an instance of NSApplication, loads the nib file, and starts the run loop. NSFIleManager, it's a high-level API for doing like file system CRUD operations, also reading things like file system metadata. And it also allows you to manage items in an iCloud container. Any of the like ubiquity or ubiquitous methods that it offers pertain to iCloud containers. NSTask will also be using that here. This allows you to run another process from your main application, similar to like the subprocess module in Python, if you're familiar with that. It can also, allows you to monitor the like termination status or the standard output and standard error. This might be useful for creating a GUI application for a command line tool. We'll also be using NSURLSession in our demo to download some source code from GitHub. This allows you to do the basic HTTP requests. It's a fairly sophisticated API. We're just going to be using the default example in our example. This is similar to NSURL connection, which is an older API. It also offers an ephemeral session, which is useful for things like streaming audio or video applications. And then download, which will continue downloading something that you start, even if your app crashes or if the user quits it. NSUserDefaults, this is the standard API for working with the preferences system. It's an ObjectiveC API. It's similar to the CoreFoundation counterpart, which is CFPreferences, but it's simpler to use in that it's an ObjectiveC API. And this is like the preferred way of like setting and retrieving your own application's preferences. And you can also use it to retrieve another app's preferences with the persistent domain for name method. PyObc, this is going to be the first demo we're going over. Some of the pros that I've noticed here when working with it, it allows Python developers to take advantage of OS X system frameworks, which is its stated goal and purpose. And Python as a language is extremely powerful and pretty easy to pick up. Some of the cons, I think, it's the community's probably not as huge as developers working with Objective-C directly. So like if you're stuck, you might not be able to find an answer on Stack Overflow, for example. Additionally, if you look at this example here, all colons, like following the selectors, are replaced with underscores, and then you push the arguments in between the parentheses there, which can kind of alter the meaning. So it can be kind of awkward. All right, so first demo, this is really quick. System frameworks in Python. Can't really see it here, but so basically this part is using the Quartz framework to get the current session dictionary, and which will actually return a Python dictionary that you can use to retrieve the like whether the screen is locked. And this example function just checks if that value is true and then returns that value. What's that?
Maybe we could turn over the license and turn it on.
Then you're possible. We did. Yes, we did.
You know where it is. I know. But I used to do this. I think it's the switches that are up here. I know. Yeah, just cooler. Don't be afraid to break things. Okay. I'm gonna glass them.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, basically the part that you'll want to look at is so this is here Quartz.cgsession copy current dictionary, and we're just assigning that to our local variable d, and then I say like if d.get, which and then I pass it the key. The session on console key is false, or if d.get session screen is locked is true, return true. Otherwise, just return false. Above that, we have just in this example function, if the current user running the script is the root user, I'm actually using the subprocess command and then like using su as the console user, and then running python-c to get the value back. It's kind of a hacky way to do it, but if you're running as root, you won't be able to, like this won't give you the right answer otherwise. NS workspace and NSApplication. This part here, assigning WS to NSWorkspace.shared workspace, and then calling the hide other applications method, which will hide all of the other applications, which is kind of interesting, potentially harmful. And then here we have these NSApplication presentation options, which are part of the kiosk mode APIs in Coco, which are useful for things like game developers that want to take over your whole Mac and allow you to play the game, or actual kiosks where you want to do things like don't allow the command tab switcher. This might be useful to you as a sysadmin if you for some reason need to run a program that does not, you don't want the user doing anything at all while this is running. You could actually prevent them from doing that and then revert them to the presentation options to the default. When you're done. All right. CFPreferences, copy app value. This allows you to retrieve a preference value using CFPreferences in Python, or Objective-C, or C rather. So here we're using just val equals CoreFoundation.CFPreferences copy app value, and then pass it the key in the domain, and then just return that value. So autofill passwords, and then com.apple.safari. Conversely, if you want to set a preference value, you could use CFPreferences set app value. Similar to the copy app value, you need to provide the key in the domain, but additionally the data as well. And then you can just pass it, pass it a Boolean, pass it a dictionary or whatever. Like it'll figure out how to actually write that to the preference file. This here, CFPreferences app value is forced, will allow you to determine if a particular preference is being managed with like MCX or something like that. So here in this example, CoreFoundation.CFPreferences app value is forced, and then passing the ask for password key, and then com.apple.screensaver. And then NS Workspace. Again, here, this function will get a list of all of the running applications on your Mac. So if we just call NS Workspace shared workspace running applications, and then we can just return a set of those if you want to determine if an app is running before, installing some software update or something like that. All right, so quick demo here of what this, there's like a Python script that just contains all of those examples that I gave here. If we run it, it'll hide the other applications. And for a split second there, I wouldn't have been able to command tab. And then here in the output, for instance, I've got a list of the Finder sidebar items, retrieved some preference values, determined whether or not the screensaver ask for password preferences is forced, and then got a list of all of the running applications. All right, so now moving on to system frameworks and Objective-C. What we'll be building. Anyone here familiar with CowSay? Okay, so it's a command line utility. You basically write, run CowSay hello, and then it'll print an ASCII cow with a speech balloon saying hello. We're just going to make a GUI front end for that that will do the same thing, but in addition to showing you the cow in the text view, it will actually speak using the system voice what the cow is saying. Also, if you are unfortunate enough to not have CowSay installed, you can use this to install CowSay. All right. So the first thing here, I sped this up because it's kind of boring. But if you actually downloaded the sample code, you can take a look at that nib file. Maybe if you create a new project, just copy this nib over to yours and play around with it. But basically, all I'm doing here is just like using Interface Builder, searching for buttons, labels, so on and so forth. It's like working with like Illustrator, basically. Really simple UI. So once you've done that, the next thing we'll need to do is wire up the UI so that we can do things like refer to these elements in code and update the UI as we're doing stuff like installing the CowSay command, the CowSay utility, and like enabling or disabling the buttons depending on state. So the first one here, what I've done is selected the label which says CowSay is not installed, and then option clicked on appdelegate.h. And then just control drag that to the right side here in the assistant editor. And we'll just call that like CowSay installed, something like that, or CowSay installed label. Same thing for the progress indicator. What I've done is selected that from the left panel there, control drag over, and I'm creating an IB outlet. So when I do this, it'll create a property. I can refer to that in my code. It'll actually create. It'll also create an instance variable that we can use with like just prepending underscore before the name. So like underscore CowSay installed label, and then we can do things like update the string value depending on whether or not the CowSay is installed. And then with the progress indicator, start spinning it when we're installing it. so on and so forth. There's also the image view CowSay installed status indicator. This is like that little red or green interface element that is used pretty commonly in Coco apps to indicate whether or not something is installed or uninstalled or whatever you want it to mean. And then the text field and the buttons here. So we have that one, the text field where you're typing in what you want the cow to say. I'm just calling that what should cow say. And then NS button, say it button is what we'll press when we actually want to display the cow saying what you've typed. And then finally here, creating an outlet for the text view. At the bottom there, we'll call it CowSay text view. In addition to the outlets, we're also going to add actions or IB actions for the install CowSay button and the say it button. And that will actually create an instance method in our appdelegate.m file that we'll use later on. So basically, you can think of that as like, when I click this button, I want some action to happen, and you write the code for that. And the last part of this here in Interface Builder, I'm going to use Coco bindings to bind the value from that text field to the shared UserDefaults controller, and give it a model key path, which is like an arbitrary string. What that will do is, when I'm typing in that field, that will save that value to my preference domain, so like com.cowsay. Whatever. And then if you were to do like a defaults read, you could retrieve that value. Additionally, we'll also use Coco bindings for the say it button. And instead of binding that to a value, which would be weird, we're binding the enabled key to the same thing. So basically what that says is, if there's a value in the that text field, enable that button, and if it's blank, then don't. And the nice thing about that is it it saves you from having to write all of this glue code by hand. All right, so the first thing we'll do is we'll go to the appdelegate.m file, and then we're going to try to determine whether or not this CowSay utility is installed. So I'm just creating a string constant here, calling it the cow herself, which I'll use this to refer to the cow, the ASCII cow that's displayed in the text view. Then I'm creating an instance method called check for CowSay. Using NSFIleManager's default manager, and then creating a string for the path to the CowSay executable. So on my machine, I just used user local bin CowSay. If you were writing like a real app that you wanted to, check for an executable, there's probably a better way to do that. But for the sake of this demo, we'll just keep it simple. So then we're going to, FM here, which we've assigned to the NSFIleManager, we'll call the isExecutableFileAtPath method, and then pass it that NS string, which was the CowSay executable. So what that's saying is, like, if this file is executable at that path, what do? I'm taking the CowSay installed status indicator, which was the little red or green interface element, and then I'm setting that to an NS image called NS image name status available, and that's something you get for free using Coco. Like that, we don't have to add an image for that button. Additionally, the CowSay installed label will set the string value to CowSay is installed when it's actually installed. And then the install CowSay button, which again, this is what we've created in Interface Builder, will set that to disabled, because it's already installed. We don't need it enabled. And then otherwise, set the Say It button to disabled. Then we'll return to the application did finish launching method, which will automatically be there in a blank Xcode project in our app delegate. And then we'll call that instance method we created, check for CowSay. And then also, using NSUserDefaults, we're going to check if there's a value for the cow herself, which is what we created at the top there, that constant. So basically, we're saying, is there an ASCII cow in our preference file? If so, let's display it in that text view so you don't lose your work. All right, most important part, NSApplication terminate reply. So the application should terminate method. This is called when the application is ready to terminate. Basically, we're going to intervene there and say, display an alert asking people why they would ever want to quit this application. It's going to make this as offensive as possible. So the first button we've added was OK. The second one is cancel. And then we can use set message text, which is what will be displayed in the alert, and then informative text, which is just at a smaller point size displayed below it. If you're an OS 10 user, you've seen those alerts, certainly. This is how you can make them. So we're saying here, if alert run modal is equal to NSAlert second button return, which is the second one we've added, which was cancel, then we're going to return NSTerminate cancel, which will cancel the termination. Otherwise, return NSTerminate now, which will continue terminating the application. Next, we're going to create an unzipper class. This will be used by our installer class, which is what we're going to use to actually download CowSay from GitHub and then install it using the install script. But before we do that, we need to have something that can unzip the zip file that we're getting from GitHub. So this will just have one instance method. We'll call it unzip, and then that takes two parameters, both NS strings, a source, and a destination. So unzip unzip source to destination. So I've added that to the header file, and then I'll add it to my implementation. Again, using NSFIleManager, we're going to check if the destination already exists. Create an NSError variable, and then a Boolean to track whether it's in a directory or if it's a file. So we'll use the NSFIleManager file exists at path is directory method to determine if the directory already exists. So we're passing that isdir Boolean by reference, and then after that square bracket, we do two ampersands, which is the logical and then isdir. So if the directory exists, remove it. This was a temporary directory that we've created. If there's any error, we're just going to log it and return. All right, so then calling the NSFIleManager create directory at path, and then passing it the destination with intermediate directories. Yes, that's equivalent to like a makedir-p from the command line. And same thing if if there's an error, let's just log in and return. Now we're going to use NSTask to actually run the unzip command. And for any of you that have used like the subprocess module in Python, you would pass the arguments to the command like as an array, and you do the same thing with NSTask. So we create the task, or an instance of the task, and then create an array, which will, in this case, contain -u, -d, and then destination and source. And we'll set the launch path to user bin unzip. You also set the current directory path to the destination, and then set the arguments, launch it, and then wait until it finishes.
So does that block that, like while the task is executing, does your app block them in that code?
It does, yeah, it blocks. So here, we're creating the installer class. Just going to go to File, New File, and then selecting, or calling it CowSay installer. It's just a subclass of NSObject, which is the root class. And that'll all just be the default options. And then here we're creating a completion block property, which the syntax is a little weird for this. I think it's borrowed from like function pointers in C. And then we'll create an instance method called download and install CowSay. So with this class, we'll import the unzipper class that we just created, because once we've finished downloading it, we want to unzip it and then do something with it. Create an IVAR to track whether this the installation is complete. And then we'll write our download and install CowSay method. So the we'll create a string for the CowSay URL, which is like the actual GitHub URL where we can get the master branch zip file, and then create an NSURLSession, and we'll call the data task with URL method, and then with completion, I believe. So you pass it the NSURL that we've created, or the completion, and then this is a completion handler, and this is we're basically passing executable code. This is a block to our to that method. So that's again why we get the weird little sad faces. So I'm going to create a temporary directory to do our work. And then the zip path will be the temp directory plus CowSay.zip, since that's where it's going to end up, and so we can refer to that later in our code. Additionally, the temp path we'll create here. It's the same thing, but just without the zip part. So that's, we'll have CowSay.zip, and then when it expands, it'll end up being in the directory called CowSay. And then we'll take the data that we get from that HTTP request, and then write it to our temp zip path, which is that string that we created. And then we'll create an instance of our CowSay unzipper class, and then call the unzip path to, or source to destination method. So unzip temp zip path to the temp path that we've created. And again, if there's an error, we're just going to log it and return. Now I'm creating a string for the install script path. And the way that I figured it out, this was just to download the zip file from GitHub and then look at the path to the install script itself, which is just, I think it's like CowSay-master/install.sh. So we're going to be downloading the zip file, expanding it, and then creating an NSTask to actually run that installer script. And this is all running, like this code won't run until the download has completed. That's what the completion handler is used for. And then I created this. We actually haven't written this method yet, but install CowSay from script and passing it the install script path. So we'll just create another method called install CowSay from script. And that takes an NS string parameter. And then we'll create an instance of an NSTask. And the array in this case is going to be the path and then the path to the install script, and then that particular install script, if you pass it like the path to where you want as a positional argument to where you want it installed, that's where it'll install it. I think otherwise it tries to install it someplace weird, so we'll put it in user local, and then it'll end up in user local bin. In this case, we'll set the launch path for this this task to bin sh. Set the arguments, and then the current directory will be the path, but by deleting the last path component, which will actually be the directory that the install script resides in. And then again, launch, and then wait until it finishes. So again, it blocks. And then we'll check the termination status of this script to determine whether or not the install was successful. So here I'm putting in install did complete with success, which we haven't written that yet, but that'll be the next method. And that takes a Boolean, yes or no. And here we'll just say if underscore installed, and if it's not complete, the complete instance variable was created up at the top, first thing we did. So then if it's not complete, then we'll set it to complete. And then return that property we created, whether or not the install was successful. So now we can go back to the app delegate and actually write the code that will be used to install the CowSay utility. So just first at the top, I imported the CowSay installer class that we created, and then go down to the IBAction instance method there that was created when I added the IBAction in interface builder. And I'll create an instance of the CowSay installer class. And this is, so once we click the button, I'll refer to the CowSay installed status indicator, set that to hidden. So that's that, again, the red or green interface element. We'll display the progress indicator, which was previously hidden, and then start animating. So actually spinning that, that circular progress indicator. And here we'll say, once, we'll call the set installed, which is that block property that we created in the installer class. We're basically setting that value here. And when this runs, set the progress indicator to hidden, or actually, when it finishes, and then stop the animation. And then actually display the status indicator. So once that returns success or failure, we can determine whether or not we want to display the green light or the red light. So we'll set the, if the installation was successful, set that label that we created that said CowSay is not installed to CowSay is installed. And then disable the CowSay installer button. Otherwise, we'll set the status indicator to red. And then finally call the download and install CowSay method. All right. And this is the last class that we're creating here. This is the one that when we actually press the button to display the cow in our text view, we want to retrieve, so basically we want to get the standard output of the CowSay command, which will be the actual, like the ASCII cow. And then additionally, we'll want to speak whatever, whatever was typed into that text field. And to do that, we'll use the say command. So creating this instance method that takes an NSString parameter and returns an NSString. And then we're creating a pipe, which if you are, familiar with shell scripting, is, the Unix pipe, essentially. Then we're going to create the file handle here, which will basically, we want to read the standard output from that pipe. Then we can do stuff with it in our Objective-C code. So for this, we'll set the launch path to CowSay, which is at user local bin CowSay. Set the standard output to the pipe that we created, launch, wait until it finishes, and then we're going to get NSData back from the file handle. And then we'll create initialize like an NS string from that NSData with the UTF-8 string encoding. Then here, we haven't written this method yet, but we'll call it say what the cow says with voice. If you wanted to, you could make another interface element that lets you select the system voice to use for speaking. In this case, we just have Alex. So we'll create the say what the cow says method. And then the best parameter name, what she said. And this basically, we're just going to use NSTask to say whatever was said, whatever you typed in that text field. So I'm creating an array called positional args, which are whatever you've typed in there separated by a space, because that's how the say command works. But then we also need to prepend to those positional arguments the -v flag along with the system voice that we want to use, which is passed in this method here. And then we'll take the mutable arguments, which was like a mutable array that we created, and then add objects from our positional arguments. So you can imagine like we have the flag, and then the positional arguments come afterwards. And then creating a non-mutable version of those arguments. Set the launch path to user bin say. Set the arguments, launch, and then here we don't wait until exit because we don't really care when it finishes talking. It doesn't matter. And then, of course, forgot to do that earlier, but return the string so we can update the text view that is displayed. So this last thing here, the say it IB action that we created in Interface Builder. This will run when we click the say it button in the UI. So we'll create an instance of the CowSay installer class that we created. But first I need to import it, and I forgot to do that there. Or I'm sorry, the CowSayer class. And then we'll assign our results variable to what we get back from the get CowSay text from, and then to that we're passing what should CowSay, which was the text field. The string value of that is what we're passing to that instance method, get CowSay text from. So that's going to give us back the cow, and then we'll call the CowSay text view, which is the big text view in the UI. Set the string to the results that we got, and then use NSUserDefaults to actually save that cow to our defaults. All right, moment of truth. So here's what it does. So it wasn't installed. I can install it. We'll type in, doing a cow thing, because that's what we're doing.
Doing a cow thing.
And that's it. It's really useful. No, but in all honesty, this is not obviously something that would be particularly helpful for your job, the actual app. But there's a ton of stuff in here that you could use to, that actually would be useful. So keep that in mind. So just to go over again what we covered. Basic usage of AppKit, Quartz, CFPreferences, and all that in Python. How to retrieve and set preference values, which is immensely useful for sysadmins. How to determine if an application value is forced with MCX or profile. How to use the kiosk mode APIs and set the presentation options. So that would be useful if, for example, you needed a script to only run when someone is logged in, or the other way around. I'm sorry, that's the next one. The kiosk mode APIs might be useful if you really want to mess with your users. And then in terms of the ObjectiveC demo, there's a lot of stuff in there. If you were so inclined to make the next MacAdmin or something like that, this is not you can start with stuff like this, just start playing around with how to use these APIs and whatnot. It's not crazy hard. And if you were able to follow Yoan's session yesterday, this is all child's play. All right, and tons of references here. This is mostly for those of you that will be downloading these slides later. And that's it. Questions? No one? No questions?
You say you had a copy of that demo on your GitHub?
Yeah. Yep. They're all. Both of them are there. It's future imperfect, and then if you just go to the repos tab, I don't think they'll be listed on the main page for me, but they're there somewhere.
They were on the main page.
Oh, are they? Oh, there you go. Cool. Oh, sorry.
The only thing we ask is that if anyone has a question, please use the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so again, I'm sorry about that, but to repeat the first question, he just wanted to know where we could get these demo projects, and they're on GitHub. My username is Future Imperfect. Then you?
This is a very important question. I was just curious why you used a string check to see if we used to work, whether it was installed or not.
Yeah, so the question was... Okay, yeah, so the question was whether we used a string or a Boolean to check if the CowSay command was installed. No, so the string was just used, was just created, which was the path to CowSay, which was user local bin CowSay. And then we're using NSFIleManager to check we were using the isExecutable_file_at_path method, passing it that string that we've created, and that will return a Boolean, so that we can determine whether or not the actual executable is there. It's a good question. Any other questions?
I
Have you used the Swift at all yet? Have you used Swift for this?
Oh, yeah. The question was, have I used Swift? No, I haven't. I've read the iBook that Apple has provided. I think when they first released it, we're at Swift 2 now, so I think a lot has changed. No, but totally, like all of this stuff you could do in Swift. I've just used Objective-C for longer, so old habits, die hard. But yeah, eventually I'll, start playing around with Swift, I'm sure. Yeah.
I know you mentioned Stack Overflow is a good resource for asking questions, but do you have any other good resources you'd recommend for exploring more in Objective-C for someone who is very new to it?
Yeah, so the question was, I mentioned Stack Overflow as a good resource. Do I have any other recommendations? Yeah, so like in terms of like resources that are really good, NSHipster is great. Just really, it's actually super, super high quality. That's made by the same guy who makes the AF networking framework, which is really popular. There was probably many of you were familiar with recent like security vulnerability in that framework. Despite that, the guy is super, super smart, and he writes really well. You can get like all sorts of, like he'll do like, we talked about like NSApplication. Like he'll do like a long form article on NSApplication going into extreme depth on like that. And, he's really passionate about his craft and stuff like that. It's a really good blog. That's just nshipster.com, I believe. There's also like, Coco is my girlfriend is another good one. Yeah. And that's just CIMGF.com, I believe. And then like there are podcasts and stuff like Guy English has who makes an app called Napkin, and he's an old timer in the industry. He makes a podcast called Debug. Yeah, I really like it. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff out there. Like, if you have an interest in it, like, I think like listening to podcasts, reading blogs, and looking at tutorials and whatnot. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Is there an immediately obvious benefit to using Python in conjunction with Objective-C languages? I mean, Python.
Yeah.
Objective-C gives you so much control that.
Yeah.
Seems like you just do everything.
Yeah, I mean, you could do everything in either one, pretty much. I think that using Python, like I write Python all day for my job. I don't use PyObc very much. Like I'm on the fence of like I'd rather just write in Objective-C. But like I think if you're really familiar with Python and you're really familiar with like these frameworks, you can do like really interesting and cool stuff with PyObc and probably faster because like overall it's just like less verbose and fewer lines of code. It's great for things like rapid prototyping. But yeah, I mean, both are I'll personally use PyObc if I just like need to write a script or something that needs to access one of these APIs. Like I think a common one that like a lot of people have probably talked about was like the CFPreferences thing. Like we can't like according to Apple, like the p-lists are an implementation detail. Like you should never like depend on like an actual p-list. But then if you need to like, for instance, like write like a complex data type like an array or like an array of dictionaries or something to a preference file, like doing that with defaults is either impossible or really hard. And using things like plist buddy, which will let you do it, you're just modifying the file. You're not, like in preference caching and all that will make your life hell if you're editing plist and expecting things to happen. So
it's pretty contextual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, at the beginning? Yeah. Was it this one or? Oh, whoops. That one? Cool. Since I know you want to see that again. That took me like 10 minutes, guys. Have any of you ever used hackertyper.com? Go to hackertyper.com right now and then just start typing and you'll feel awesome. That's a screenshot of Hackertyper in the back. And then, of course, what's that?
Make sure to bring it up on any faculty.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just really happy I'll never have to touch AppleScript ever again.
Yeah. Yeah, I've used AppleScript too. It has its uses, but I can never remember like the keywords, like let alone like.
They try to make it so much like language.
Yeah.
That was it is short.
I'm like, how do I make a variable? Yeah.
In the Python demo, you used NSURLSession, Python standard library to download something.
Oh, yeah. So his question was in the Python demo, we used NSURLSession instead of like the Python standard library. We actually used NSURLSession in the Objective-C demo, not the Python one. You could use NSURLSession. Like if a reason you might want to do that is so like say for example you wanted to take advantage of like the ephemeral session, which would be like if you want to make like a streaming audio or streaming video application in Python and have like and Coco, or the download session, which would be like we want this to continue downloading even if the app quits. Like those are pretty cool features of NSURLSession, and NSURLSession is like a fairly new API. Yeah, in Python, like for basic stuff, I would just use I'd probably use requests. The request library is really good. But then there's also like, URL lib and whatnot. If you want to keep it limited to the standard library.
Right. In Interface Builder, you have like objects on top of other objects, like a spinning progress indicator. Like, how do you select? Do you have to?
It's a pain in the ass. Yeah. So basically,
Easy way to do it.
yeah, the easy way to do it is to not select the actual like if, for instance, like if I had like an NS image view and a NS progress indicator overlaid on top of one another.
Right.
So first, you drag it over and then you drag one on top of it. And then, you'll get, it'll align them correctly. But then if I need to like create outlets for those, select it in the left sidebar.
So you have to expand it all the way out. And
Yeah, don't select that. I mean, you can do either one, but like, I think if you were to slow down in the IB outlets and IB actions screencasts, you'll see like I try to click one and I'm like, fuck, can I move over to the sidebar?
Yeah.
And then, you can control drag from there as well.
okay.
So
So you just have to. They're not really named there, though, right? You just have to figure out which one it is.
yeah, if you have a really complex, like with a app with a ton of elements, it can be kind of difficult for sure. But yeah, I mean, you usually like if I have like 10 NS, like you can get narrow it down that way.
How'd you get the actual jelly bean in there? Is that just like a picture you found somewhere, or the image cell, like with the jelly bean inside of it, the green light?
That okay. So the question was the like jelly bean thing that shows like the red or green status indicator. That is that's part of like I don't know where it's included, but it's included on OS 10.
Oh,
and you can if you just if you use like image named, and then you pass it the constant. It's like image name status available or image name status unavailable available or whatever. There's also like there's other ones that like the gray, which would like indicate, you know, like nothing. And then there's the yellow one. I don't know. They're all there.
Thanks.
I think, like that's one of those things that originally when I was like, made an app that I wanted to display those, like looking online, everyone's like, oh, those are part of like iChat, and you have to like take them from the iChat bundle. Turns out you don't. Like they're included. You just
There's a lot of bad information online.
yeah. Yeah. What? No. All right, I think it's almost lunchtime. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone.